This is Brent Miller with HED Architects and Engineers. You're listening to EdUp Accelerated Excellence.
The EdUp Accelerated Excellence podcast is supported by the 2.0 conferences to be held in Las Vegas, April 7th through 9th, 2026. Business leaders, educators, healthcare experts, marketing and tech professionals, and founding entrepreneurs are welcome to take part. Reserve your space today and receive a 15% discount courtesy of EdUp Accelerated Excellence with the code EDUPXE15OFF. That's EDUPXE15 off. Learn more and register online at the2conf.com. That's the2conf.com with the code EDUPXE15OFF.
Welcome to EdUp Accelerated Excellence, the podcast for the advancement of educational excellence and equity. And I'm your host, Jacob Easley, the second PhD PMP. And we're excited about this second installation on a series highlighting the work of International Baccalaureate. We have released an episode with Robert Kedley, and now we are here with his colleague, Antrina Leeth, who is Senior Outreach and Development Manager. So Antrina, will you please introduce yourself to the EdUp Accelerated Excellence community by giving voice to your name?
Thank you so much, Jacob. First, let me say it's a pleasure to be on the EdUp Accelerated Excellence podcast. It's an honor to be included and to just kind of share to this space that I think is super important. As you stated, my name is Antrina Leeth. I've been part of the IB community for over 20 years. First, externally, lots of different hats, a classroom teacher, an IB coordinator, International Baccalaureate coordinator, coordinating programs at a school level, a school leader, an IB district leader, and probably my most excited role is being an IB parent. Having children who have intentionally gone through the IB program, earned their IB diploma, doing big things, schools, scholarships, all that great stuff. And then switching to my internal role with the IB, which is one of the best roles ever, to support schools who are thinking about becoming an International Baccalaureate World School. I get to help them with that exploration and that thought leadership and building buy-in and then essentially like getting them on board on their journey to be part of this broader community. So that's a little bit of me.
That's wonderful. So senior outreach and development manager, and we can see why you have grown up in the IB enterprise. So, and you talked about onboarding of new institutions. So that's what development and outreach entails in this regard. Tell us about that process. So what is it like? How does one, if you're interested in becoming an IB school, how does it start?
Yeah, I think primarily, the IB inception came after World War II, right? And it was in this space of, okay, we are all, as a global humanity, we understand the value of educating our students, right? They need to learn. We want them to learn. Little schoolhouse with 5 kids in it has expanded and kids are going to get educated. And IB really came at a time when it was like, and how do we do more? How do we ensure that beyond the academics, the 2 + 2 = 4, A, B, C, D, we're pouring into what it feels like to be a global citizen, to bring more to humanity. And so I think that is a really important starting place for schools. So for school communities, whether they have determined themselves by doing some of their own exploration, like, hey, when we think about the tenets of IB and the pedagogical learning that comes with it, just the teaching and learning of what they'll get and the resources, we want to know more. Or we are just doing our natural IB thing. Schools are celebrating themselves, we're celebrating them. We essentially help schools determine how this will be a good fit for them. And that is our role, is to either help schools who are already kind of invested and really just need to know the logistical journey of the housekeeping, like, what do I do first? What do I do second? What do I do third? As well as bringing schools into a space where they can kind of observe why an IB education is so phenomenal And sometimes that just naturally leads them to wanting to know more about that. And so, at a high level, that process is really what we call our authorization journey, which really just includes schools working with our internal stakeholders at the IB. We have consultants, we have those subject matter experts steeped into all things IB and supporting them through a journey that actually takes anywhere from, I would say, 18 to sometimes 36 months, because it is really embedding a whole school culture in what it means to be an IB school.
That sort of sounds like someone who's in the initial stage of being recognized by an accreditor, or NACI for the development of young children. Those kind of institutions, they go through a review, so it takes a while. So 1 to, in this case, probably 2 to 3 years. What have you found to be the most difficult challenge for institutions, and what should they think about and how to overcome that challenge if they want to pursue IB status?
Yeah, I would say, something that schools are often excited about and may consider it a potential challenge or see it as a challenge, but most excited about is doing something transformative, right? As someone also who's classically trained as an educator, I'm very honest, I had never heard of the IB. So when I started off in my school, 3 years into teaching, principal came in, was like, we're going to do this IB thing. I was like, yay, IBM, I need a new laptop. Mine is moving slow. And she's like, you're not paying attention, Antrina. Focus. No one's talking about computers. And so I think from there, so I'm very honest with you, Jacob, I was a little bit of a critical friend. What does this mean? What does this look like? What will I have to change? What does this mean for student data? And so I think one of the important things that school communities will embrace over time, starting their IB journey, is really they ask themselves these questions about what are the best practices we're doing? How do we have the evidence that they're best practices? How do we have the resources? How do we have a community of learners, not just in our school or district, but around the world, affirming that these are best practices? And so I will say that piece is a piece that becomes some work to embrace, but really the reward at the end, that I have yet to meet an IB educator that's just like, oh, I went through all this. This was just horrible. No, you typically, I'm meeting educators like, we went through this. There was some learning, which is important. We are educating young people, and so we should also continue to be learners. And then they embrace it. They just really, or as I like to say, they drink the whole IB Kool-Aid. First they sip it. They're like, oh, this is great. And then they want a picture of IB-ness.
So I like that focus on having, being able to articulate the transformational value of the work that you're currently doing, and then how that you can translate that into the broader scope of what IB is contributing to the education community and for families.
Yeah.
So from your office, what are you currently celebrating?
Yeah. So I think our community of IB educators, they're so excited to really ensure our young people are ready for the world post K-12, right? That is essentially our job, is to help them ease into that post K-12 and then feel comfortable and confident and successful in how they may define that in that space. And, the truth of the matter is, Jacob, we both know this, sometimes stepping into that space requires just some grown-up steps, right? There's things you have to do to have a face in that step. And one of those things is, we see young people in 11th and 12th grade filling out what's called the Common App, which is really popular in the United States. It's the app that allows them to apply for multiple colleges and universities at once, or at least put their information in there. And the International Baccalaureate has been represented on there for years. And most recently, our career-related program has been designated on the recommender school report system, where students can select the career-related program. Mm-hmm. Why is that super cool right now? It's because it also demonstrates that this student has not only engaged in college level courses, which the IB program is at the high school level, but they've also made space to do a career exploration. And if we look across the US, the thing that continues, I believe, to get flooded with attention, no matter where you're sitting on aisles, is how do we prepare young people for careers of the future as fast as they're changing? How do we still ensure that they are embedded with the skills? And so I think young people who are invested in our career-related program, being able to see themselves represented after putting in all that hard work on a national platform, that's super celebratory, right? They feel included in that space because they're doing something a little bit different.
Yeah, definitely. College and career readiness is sort of the mantra of how we think about, and I don't want to say basic education, but pre-K through 12 education.
Yeah.
So I want to ask for folks who are still thinking about IB, and given the description you just gave, how does IB curriculum in general, how is it different or similar to what folks might consider to be advanced placement courses?
So the International Baccalaureate is a framework that really looks at students and says, how do we highlight, right? We talked about this inception of it was beyond academics, right? How do we really look at the whole child? And then that's a trend phrase. We hear say, oh, the whole child, student-centered whole child. But the tenets and the elements of IB really give spaces for students to demonstrate their skills beyond just, can I conquer calculus? Can I conquer algebraic thinking? Can I read this text and respond critically? It's giving them spaces to show their own thinking, right? We have these places like in elementary, they do something called the PYP exhibition, where they think of a question, they start with a question that might impact their local, regional, or global community. And like, this is more than just a science board with a question on it. They do a project. It is really a thought of them thinking about what action can they take, who's impacted by this in their community, fast track, and to high school. There's something in the IB program that our career-related students participate in that I was just mentioning is on the Common App, and it's called a reflective project. In that reflective project, they have to think of an ethical issue that could arise from that career focus that they're interested in. So about 3 weeks ago, I was working with a school that's had CP for a little time, and the young lady, it's an arts program, and she's a dancer. And so her ethical question was, to what extent do we do like damage or harm to our body to show up to be the best dancer we can be? And she tapped on just some things like maybe lack of sleep because you're in the studio for so long versus I'm not eating because I need to stay thin. Like, right, not her in particular, but dancers doing things like, right? And if you see a fellow friend / dancer doing some of these extreme things to stay fit or to be in shape or to be the best dancer, what do you do about that? Like, right? Like, is that something, how do you respond to that? Who do you go to for help? So I think all of those things is what makes it different than students just, hey, I'm taking this course. It is, I am asking questions about the things that matter in the world around, and then I'm using the skills from various courses to be excellent at thinking about that topic. My own son, he was in the diploma program, and his was, he'll kill me if he hears this, but his was like, I always tease, it was about Spider-Man. And his extended essay was, if Spider-Man were to really mesh or gel with the human body, which breed of spider or spiders would align best? Jacob, 14 actual spiders, real spiders, not fake ones, not the rubber ones from Halloween, moved into my house while he did tests and experiment and checked all this stuff to be able to write this like final research paper on which breeds of spiders would do well with human DNA. That's like cool stuff. That's more than just sitting in a pre-cal class or a calculus AB class and doing the work.
I mean, it probably gives you the willies or heebie-jeebies to have spiders in your house, but absolutely phenomenal. So we're speaking with Antrina Leeth, who is Senior Outreach and Development Manager at International Baccalaureate. So Antrina, since you brought your son up, you have 3 children who have gone through IB.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they all have different passions. And I know this because you and I spoke a bit briefly prior to So biochemistry, humanities, and arts. So
Yeah.
tell us about what is it like being a parent who watches a child go through the IB experience, whether they start in elementary or at an upper grade?
I think the experience first as a parent watching your children go through the IB is it actually pushes you as a parent, if that is not the education you were exposed to. And I'm going to say, I grew up in New York. I went to a Catholic school in the Bronx. I won't say their name. Shout out. I think they're still open. And great school. I loved all, my Sister Milagros and Sister Maria, but it was pretty black and white, right? So as a parent, I think when your kid comes home with 14 spiders, I think when your kid comes home and says things like, hey, we're being asked in 5th grade, for example, to think about what role we can play in healthier eating habits for our friends and stop, just eating junk food. You ask yourself, is this like, okay, but where's the multiplication sheet, right? Because so many of us as parents got this very black and white approach to teaching and learning, right? You memorize your multiplication tables, you do your handwriting, you very scripted. And so I think what a parent can expect is to start to ask themselves, wow, what is it you're learning? How's your teacher getting you to this place? They can also expect that their child will probably come home with some things that include their parents. I was supporting a middle school group. I was their mentor for their community project, which is something we ask our middle years program students to do in 8th grade. And it was like a gluten-free cookbook, right? But it was like, but we want yummy recipes that kids our age would eat, not that stuff that we see in these restaurants on the corner. We don't want any of that. That sounds yuck. And I mean, just to see the number of parents at a school that doesn't always have a lot of parent involvement actually be a part of making some of these food dishes, right? And or helping their kids make some of these things in the kitchen, because at the end of the day, no matter how busy a parent you are, you're feeding your kids. So to hear kids talk about how they convinced their parent to get this food item or that food item to try and see if it didn't have gluten in it, what it would taste like, this macaroni and cheese. I think that is like the experience. That's been my experience, to hear my kids be critical thinkers, have conversations in ways that, to be honest, maybe I wasn't even prompted to think about as a student growing up. I'm not going to say my age, because then you'll know why my education was so old school, but close to 50.
Yeah.
So
I'm going to piece it together for you because I have a response to this.
But yeah.
Yeah. So, I'm thinking about, if you watched the movie Stranger Things, it's in the 80s. And
Yes.
One of the things that's so interesting about it is the fact that children had a lot of time to roam and to be with each other. So I just remember you pretty much self-governed yourself a lot.
Yeah.
So what you're telling me now is coming home, having children who are in IB, where they're now engaging the parents in conversations about their work, is quite different from the 80s, where you were expected to do your homework, and then after you do your homework, you can go out. But no one really sort of managed it unless you were flailing in some ways, or you weren't doing well. As long as you were doing well in school, parents really didn't intervene.
Yeah. You're right. And I think the beauty of IB schools is when schools, you had asked earlier a little bit about the journey of becoming an IB school. One of the things that's part of that journey at the kind of the tail end before we become fully authorized, because again, I want to name different than like what feels like an accreditation process, which tends to focus primarily on schools and this kind of checklists and compliance. Our authorization journey feels very much and actually requires the school community to be involved. So we actually interview parents on this like kind of authorization path to ask them, what are they seeing different? And I think this in a different way even kind of encourages a school community, regardless of the demographics, right? Whether it's affluent or somewhere in between or a little bit less, to just really ensure that parents understand the value of that IB education, because they are part of the community that IB values as well internally. And we help encourage and support schools to include them in their communities as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very important distinction, because it does speak to or hearken to this idea of community or situated learning.
Mm-hmm.
So as you are now attesting to, but Robert also spoke about in the earlier episode about the agency of students working on projects to solve real world problems, particularly within their communities. So this is sort of a holistic educational experience, not only for students, but also for the communities in which they live or come from.
Yes.
Thank you for listening to EdUp Accelerated Excellence. This episode is supported by the 2.0 conferences to be held in Las Vegas, Nevada, USA, April 7th through 9th, 2026. Business leaders, educators, healthcare experts, marketing and tech professionals, and founding entrepreneurs are welcome to take part. Reserve your space today and receive a 15% discount courtesy of EdUp Accelerated Excellence with the code EDUPXE15OFF. That's EdUPXE15OFF. Check out the details in the show notes or learn more and register online at the2conf.com. That's the2conf.com with the code EDUPXE15OFF.
So when you think about schools, and I want to talk about this notion of social emotional needs, because I think that is a big topic now, whether some people call it SEL, social emotional learning, but in general, what does that look like in terms of thinking about not only this for students who are coming to a new way of learning, if they're not used to IB, but also for parents, because that has to be a huge shift for folks to think about it's a lot of student-directed learning in some ways, or student-centered learning.
Yeah. Well, IB has, from, many perspectives, have voiced the importance of well-being, right? So we say social emotional learning. We know in education things may take on a trend term, but essentially what we are saying when we say social emotional learning is the well-being of students. And so that is a tenet and a cornerstone that has always been a value in the IB and explicit. We have a professional development workshop on student well-being that schools can participate in. And I think that's important. I think in general, our professional development opportunities are super important. One, they're available at all times for schools, which helps minimize school leaders or district leaders to have to think about curating or creating these professional development opportunities, because we have them ready with subject matter experts to be able to offer young people. And I think that also adds to the community feel. I often encourage schools take a look at our professional development, see how that aligns with your mission and vision around social emotional learning or student well-being. Does this kind of match what you're hoping to bring parents and student communities? And often the answer to that in our PD is yes. Mm-hmm. We want students to feel like they belong. We want them to have opportunities to succeed. Their families want that. And so that's important for us to support that.
I definitely agree. So let's stick with this idea of professional development. So if you were taking what you know about the IB model, if you could redesign professional development for teachers in general, from the ground up, what would that look like from your experience in IB at multiple roles and levels?
Okay, this one's going to be a little controversial because, anything associated with funds and money can be controversial, but we got to get teachers out of their own environment for professional development. One of the most revolutionary things for me when I became part of the IB community, and had been, like I said, teaching for years, all of my PD either happened at my district level office or they happened right in my school, sitting in my library with all the people I see every day. Love them to death, but I saw them all the time. We became an IB school. I got sent to an IB workshop in Lake Tahoe, right? I got sent to an IB workshop in Connecticut. And at the time I was teaching in Florida. You're sending me where? Connecticut, right? And I think anyone who takes a look at our IB community, we have IB professional developments in always our three working languages, which is English, Spanish, and French, offered across the world all the time, everywhere, right? And I think it's worth it. I felt super valued and invested in as an educator from my principal when she was like, yeah, I'm going to be honest, Jacob, I'm not sure if I've ever would have pointed to Lake Tahoe on a map to send myself to a professional development. So I think, if there was something like ground, shake it up, what a revolutionary thing it is for an educator to get out of their own space of their district or their school that they're typically developed in and go someplace else with peers who are still elementary teachers or middle school teachers, still trying to do their best and hear what that looks like in other parts of the country or other parts of the world. I was at a school in the Bronx and they're starting their IB program about 6 months ago. And the young woman who was designated to be the IB coordinator reached out. She's like, so do I need anything before I leave for my trip? I'm going to get my IB coordinator training. I'm so excited. Anything I need before I get to Dublin? I was like, your principal's sending you to Dublin, Ohio? There's some training I think happening in New York in a week. She's like, no, Dublin, Ireland. I literally almost like scratched like you convinced your principal to send you to Dublin, Ireland from the Bronx to get PD? She was so excited. Like that was a moment that I was like, the excitement in her voice. And then I spoke to her when she came back, the way she turnkeyed that information, not only about the PD, but her experience in Dublin. That's like that international mindedness that we want to see happen in schools across the world, and especially in our urban schools in the US.
Oh, so this is phenomenal. So international baccalaureate. So again, let's just situate this. I'm in New York City. You're from the Bronx. So there's an IB in the Bronx. And of course, New York has so many resources. So the UN is here and other, international conglomerates and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. Imagine you're in the Bronx. One of the, we understand the Bronx to have its own struggles, sort of economically and politically, is one of the most low income districts. Mm-hmm. As some people look at it. But then you may be in another rural area. How do we think about this notion of internationalization? So other than language to study, how do you bring that to bear for those kind of places?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, Jacob, because when we think about international study, I think we're also saying, you probably have heard me interchangeably say international mindedness and global citizen, right? And maybe some different definitions if you dropped it in AI, but essentially what IB is saying is how does it look like for us to be part of this global, what is our responsibility to be part of a global community? Mm-hmm. And so whether you are sitting in a school in the Bronx or you're in a rural school in the middle of Kentucky somewhere, that doesn't change what could potentially be your impact on a global society. Give you a quick example. I was in a school supporting in Maine, Belfast, Maine, small little town right by the water, very picturesque. I thought I had stepped right into Gilmore Girls again. And, when I was talking to parents, the superintendent wanted me to kind of chat with parents. One was very upfront with me, Jacob, and said, hey, look, I think all this IB stuff is great, but we own a business here. It's been a family business, and I want my kid to stay right here, Belfast, Maine, and keep the business going. So does this international mean, he's got to leave, he's got to go abroad, he's got to send away? And it was quite exciting to actually explain, no, that's not what it means. But it also means that when people from other communities may come to Belfast, how do we also support those community members? Your business, maybe you want to expand it outside of Belfast, Maine, and maybe not a brick and mortar, but just how do you connect on various social medias? The world gets pulled in when you think about all the platforms you can pull people together. And I think through that lens, the parent was really able to see international mindedness or being an international perspective, not just about, hey, go see the world, right? I tell anybody who listen, yes, my kid graduated with his IB diploma and flew to Germany 2 months after he walked across the stage, and he actually just graduated last week, a week from today. Yay! Thank you. Super excited. Super proud mom. But that's not necessarily what it means, right? It could mean I have the skills to know how to approach others, or even my own community, right? So I think that's important.
So Thank you for this. You have talked about development of teachers in some ways. We've addressed what it might be like for a parent who supports their child in IB, but also supports the school because, as you mentioned earlier, parents are integral to that authorization for IB status. So let's now talk about the importance of roles of school leaders. So when you think about the leaders in an IB school, what traits come to mind for you?
Definitely open-minded. I'm going to be quoting some IB learner profiles. Every IB school around the world, we have these 10 IB learner profile that we really ask a school community embrace. And at first I was like, I remember when I started in the process, I was like, oh yeah, 10 words. These are great. Sounds like PBIS. Yeah, we want people to be good people. These sound like good words. But when you think about the traits that really help people to be able to show up and be leaders, someone showing up as their best leader to lead schools or anyone really encapsulates a lot of these traits, right? So, but I would say outside of all 10, which I would communicator, open-minded, risk taker, balanced, knowledgeable thinker, right? The list goes on. I would say being a risk taker is going to be an important one. And risk taker in that if you're starting your journey to become an IB World School and some things feel a little different, it's a little bit of risk to say, I'm okay with this different because I also can attest that this different is still an effective and best practice for kiddos, right?
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I was a school leader having a teacher come in, start the IB journey. Miss Leeth, I've been doing this longer than you've been alive, baby. Yes, you have, and I understand that. I do respect that. However, I'm never going to ask you to do anything that's not good for kids. So I knew she was coming at me with a little bit of, do we have to do this? I don't want to do this. And I had to be honest and say, you got to be honest with me. If you ever think I'm asking you to do something that's not good for kids, that will not move them to their best, tell me. I'm open to that. But if it's really, this is about a challenge for change for you because you've been doing something different longer than I've been alive, that's a different perspective. And you got to let me help you with that pathway, right? So let's talk about those things. So I think, through that lens, a school leader has to be ready to be a risk taker, be open-minded, which is what my question was when I asked, like, which one? Is it this or this? And how can I help you? I think they have to be ready to, get in there and be a critical thinker with their community, right? And this is not a profile. Well, caring is, I was going to say compassionate, but caring is one of the IB learner profiles. I think you got to be caring because at the end of the day, we're in the business of people. We're not in the business of a Peloton. We're in the business of people, right? And so teachers are the people delivering. Our students are the people. The parents are the people. So I think caring is really an important one as well.
We're speaking with Antrina Leeth, who is Senior Outreach and Development Manager at International Baccalaureate. So, Antrina, you have grown up in IB, as we've mentioned before. So let's talk a bit about you and your journey. So what do you believe, or how have you changed with regard to your ideas around educational leadership and policy, having grown up in IB? So maybe you can compare before and now that you are Senior Outreach Development Manager. What's changed about you in terms of how you think about leadership and policy in education?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jacob. Let me think about that for a second. I mean, what feels like the most immediate change, being, again, traditionally trained to be an educator, right? That's what I went to school for higher ed. I think what has changed over 20 years doing this work, it is really, what is the end goal? It's easy, I think, like most things, lots of things in this world, to get pulled into the quantitative side of things, right? So I think as a school leader, I was always, hey, our kids getting lined up on time? Our kids moving through the cafeteria on time? Our kids getting their 90 minutes of reading instruction? You should still be. And getting caught up into the quantitative, even around data and assessments. And I'm going to say that with a little bit of softness because not by any means indicating that metrics are a bad thing. Metrics are a great thing, but they shouldn't live in isolation. I think being steeped in IB for as long as I have, it feels like the quantitative and qualitative tenets of education should hold the same exact weight. The same way we want to see a student's data demonstrate that they are ready for that next grade level, or they're ready for higher education. We should, I feel like the policies we have in place should also show that they can persevere through that. My kids are all college age now, and I can say, in circles of my friends or beyond my friends, we all probably know somebody who their child is like, the perseverance through college has been a challenge for them, or the perseverance through a career path and being able to handle, hey, I've applied to 12 places and no one has said yes yet, right? If they've chosen a career path right out of high school, those things are super important. Like, as important as did you get the 5 on your AP or your IB or AP, like, right, on your coursework? Did you, that number, while important in that moment, those skills, those qualitative skills that live in all of our programs, the primary years program, middle years program, diploma program, and career-related program, are just as important.
So I was going to ask you, now you have me thinking out loud. I rarely do this on air, but I was going to ask you one question.
Sure.
But I was thinking as you were talking, and you brought up, I think I heard in this response, your son again. I don't know why he popped into my head. So you have 3 children who are now college age. So this is a detour.
Okay.
As a parent with 3 children who are in college or pursuing study beyond IB, but IB graduates, what does that look like for them now that they've gone through IB and they're pursuing higher education? How has IB shaped them as young adults in college?
Okay. Well, I'm going to tell you the story that, again, I'm sure if my daughter hears this podcast, she'll be like, Mom, you said that to everybody in the world here. But her freshman year, which she's about to start her junior year, also a phenomenal IB student, did her extended essay on like some combination of the French Revolution and anime. I don't even know how those two things come together, but somehow they did, because she got an A on her extended essay. She was on FaceTime with me once and took the camera and kind of tilted to the side, and her roommate, who she didn't know, it was just a random roommate, had her head down. And I was like, oh, what's wrong with her? And she's like, she has to write a 4-page paper. She clearly did not do the IB, or she would not be stressing over this 4-page paper. Like, right up to Julie, well, why don't you go ask her if she needs help? Maybe she should have done the IB. I was like, she was, no, I'm just kidding. I'm going to go check on her and see if she's okay. So, I just share that to say, I think if you talk to any admissions person at a college and university, which I had the chance to be on a panel with a few college university representatives about 3 months ago, what they all identified, without being biased towards any one program or another, is that they saw that IB students came prepared for college and universities. They came prepared not just for the academic work, but the perseverance. They came with the self-management skills. They came with the social skills, like how do I stay balanced? They came with the communication skills, like, right, your parent can't email your professor. I mean, they can, but that's not going to look too hot. So they know how to reach out to their TAs and say, hey, I need a little help, because these are things that were embedded in them in order to be successful and thrive as IB students.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. So, and it sort of now takes us back to the 80s. I'm riffing at this point.
Yeah, I love it.
Once now they're in college, they can absolutely, for the most part, do this. I'm not saying on their own, meaning no one helps them, but they're able to advocate for themselves.
That's right.
So they have the tools that prepares them for, and I don't like this word, but I'm going to use it, rigor, the academic rigor of post-secondary study. So that's wonderful.
Absolutely.
Now, this is the question I was going to ask, but I had to integrate that, because where do you get a chance to speak to a parent who has multiple children in college from IB who are IB graduates. But what has been the success story of your work in IB that really keeps you going? Or what has been, an example of success that whenever you think about it, it tells you, yes, keep putting one foot in front of the other?
Yeah, it is students. It is when schools get to the end of their journey. The schools are fully authorized, IB World School. They persevered as a school community for the 2 to 3 years that it takes to get there. And then I go back and visit the school. So, for example, Hempstead Union Free School District, you probably know where Hempstead is, right? It's, other side. They were one of my first school districts that decided to do what's called a group of schools implementation. So, and I think over the years, 1 or 2 schools have either consolidated, but at the time it was approximately 7 PYPs, I believe, and 1 MYP. So 7 primary years program, the elementary program, and 1 middle years program. And the district was making this brave initiative to say, we're going to turn all our elementary schools into IB primary years program schools. This was pretty, I would say, provocative to do at the time because almost all of those schools were under receivership, where it was like, hey, we're going to wipe everybody out and start over.
Mm-hmm.
And the district decided to say, hey, let's try something transformative. So there goes that word again, right? And now let's fast track 2025. None of those schools are in receivership anymore, right? And not to say just PYP and overnight, but with PYP and the dedication, none of those schools are in receivership. The district has been so invested and so proud of their work. They have hosted events where they invite other schools. We've had people from Canada come to their intervision, or what I like to call IB in Action Day. Come see IB in action. And the day is 75% led by students. So remember, these are elementary schools. That means these are led by 4th and 5th graders that are giving tours, telling people about what's happened in the classroom, telling you about their unit of study, their conceptual questions, how their teacher suggested something and they gave a different suggestion. That's what keeps it exciting and going. You're like, oh, okay. Because we know we can step into a classroom and a teacher can be a sage on the stage, pontificating all the information that unfortunately now kids can get from ChatGPT or their phone. They just need to ask Siri. So to see spaces where it's not just a teacher, regurgitating to students or standing in front and piling on information, to see it's a space where students can and have authentically been able to explain their learning. Yeah, that feels like the win.
Yeah, I could see that. And it makes me smile to think about it. Coming from the world of educator preparation, when you go into a classroom, one of the first things that I like to do is to ask the students what they're learning. Mm-hmm. And it seems so novel, but you'll be surprised at how many times that's not the case.
Yeah.
Often looking at the future, the student teacher and what they're doing, but not necessarily drilling down to, well, is this really beneficial, or what is the transformational value for the student, him or herself?
Right.
I think that's important. So, Antrina, what is next for you or your office in the international baccalaureate world, and how can the EdUp Accelerated Excellence community connect with you?
Well, I think to connect with me, just got to ping me. This has been great, Jacob. I'm willing to do this over and over and over again. I've had fun talking to you. You make it easy. I've done other interview things in other spaces. I've got to say this one has felt the most comfortable. So would love to share with you more if there's other opportunities. I think for the organization, we remain committed to what our mission statement says, that the International Baccalaureate is set to build inquiring, caring, knowledgeable young people to help make the world a better, more peaceful place. We have, just like I mentioned earlier, there's the quantitative and qualitative side of things. So as an organization, we have a quantitative goal of something we want to achieve by 2032 to see how we can help more students be a part of this, and how do we get to hear what schools need and ask them, well, can we be your solution? When you hear what IB brings to the table, if you have this, here's how maybe we are the solution for that, between the professional development, between the higher ed prep, between helping young people as young as age 6 ask these cool questions and create these projects and gluten-free cookbooks. So I think that is where the org sees themselves, as staying committed and not giving up, that young people are the answer of the future, as cliche as that sounds, it really is. And that we have created a framework that gives intentional opportunities and spaces for that to live in a student's experience throughout their whole IB experience, whether they do an elementary, middle, high school, or one portion. So I think that being part of an organization that has that level of like qualitative commitment tied to, hey, a real mission of we can do this. This is how many kiddos we want to impact. That's just a starting place. We'll see how far we go. I think that's pretty cool. Where will I be personally? In 5 hours. I'm actually getting on a plane to go to Egypt. So that's where you'll find me.
Wow.
Yes.
IB related? Okay. It doesn't have to be IB. You are a full, actualized person.
Yes, but my hope is to maybe visit an IB school while I'm there. That is yes, to pop my head in and say hello and say I'm going to connect with my colleague who supports schools over there and say hello to a school.
So before we end this, your description made me think of a slogan, and I'm going to pitch this to you.
Okay.
Be a or the solution in the world.
I love that.
Those are your words, but as I heard you say that, I was thinking, wow, what a wonderful kind of mantra to think about, as it be a solution in the world.
Yes.
And particularly since this IB really embraces the idea of peace. How profound is that,
Yep, absolutely.
And thank you for this opportunity to learn with and from you here at EdUp Accelerated Excellence.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you, Jacob.
A special thanks to our research assistant, Emily Bloom, a recent graduate of Fordham University's Mental Health Counseling Program. Congratulations, Emily! And we want to hear from you. If you have feedback on this or other episodes, or would like to nominate a guest, contact us online at edupxe.com. That's edupxe.com.
Thank you for engaging with EdUp Accelerated Excellence, a member of the EdUp Experience Network of educational podcasts. You can find this and other episodes on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Radio, and other outlets where you listen to your favorite podcasts. If you like this episode, don't forget to follow us and share within your network. To leave a comment or suggest a guest, contact us online at edupxe.com.